Incoming transmission.
Hey everybody, this is Ed with My Figure Universe, and this week my guest is Jeff from Renegade Shipyards. You have probably seen all of his work all over the internet. You've probably seen me share it at least, I don't know, 6, 7 times a week. And yeah, I'm really glad to have you here. Good to meet you, Jeff. How are you doing?
Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you as well, Ed. Great to meet you face to face. I know I followed your Instagram as well for a very long time with My Figure Universe. So awesome posts all the time with relevant Star Trek stuff all the time. So certainly no stranger to your Instagram. But nice to meet you. I'm doing fine, thanks. How are you?
I'm good. I appreciate you being here. I knew that I wanted to have you on here from the very beginning because, like, if you think back to when I was doing posts about like Friday feature, and like, here's this person, go check them out. You were the first person I ever featured. And it simply
Wow.
came down to, okay, who am I going to choose? And I chose you because I don't want to use the word loyalty, but like you were a regular visitor. You were there, you were liking, commenting, sharing. And I was like, okay, I like this. This is cool. And
Yeah,
I love what you're doing. I love your work. And I wanted more people to see it. Now I'm a small pond or a fish in a big pond, but I'm doing my best to boost the signals however I can. So I knew I
right.
wanted to have you on here to talk to you about that and hear a little bit more about your process. And
No, I appreciate that. And truthfully, I'm thrilled to follow your work. I think I've said this to you before. It's one thing for me to post pictures of the work that I do, but you actually go above and beyond and the tailor-made sort of content that you have where you've got, thematic things happening on different days of the week, graphics and everything, polls and you start conversation and dialogue. And that is to me above and beyond just posting pictures of pretty starships, right? Like anyone can really do that. But no, I totally applaud your efforts as well. So I'm delighted to be here and appreciate the commentary around being the first feature. That's pretty cool. I didn't realize that.
oh yeah, oh yeah. And I appreciate your kind words as well. A lot of it comes down to when it comes to polls and interaction. It's like I don't want it to be about me, so I'm going to say this really quick. I grew up without Star Trek fans in my life. I didn't have
Mm,
friends that were Star Trek fans. So like watching the movies, reading the books, it was stuff I did alone, and I didn't have people to talk about it with. And then even like I think of like when COVID was happening, there
yeah,
were like in the early days of COVID, there was screenings for What We Left Behind at in theaters. And I
yeah,
remember telling my wife, I want to go, I want to go. I said, these are my people. And I've never
right,
sat in the theater with my people. And
yeah, right.
we didn't get to do it. And then this came around. I thought, let's do the page, let's work it up, and then
Yeah.
let's do this. So
Right. No, it's fantastic. I think it's awesome. And so likewise, just, my sort of history, I guess, with Star Trek. And, I probably have a similar story and I know we're not alone in it. I've been a fan since I was probably 7 years old, I think. And I absolutely remember growing up with Next Generation being, first run new episodes and looking forward to those. And, the original series, of course, were in reruns. But while I was, I wouldn't say alone. I certainly didn't have a large group of friends that liked Star Trek, but I had some. But it definitely wasn't deemed, cool. It was not cool to be a Star Trek fan back in, the 90s, as much as we maybe wanted to be. But no, it's definitely something where over the years, obviously, ebbs and flows with we had an entire era of nonstop sort of new episodes, sometimes two series running concurrently, new movies, lots of content to, then it kind of went away. And then obviously it started to come back. But COVID happening, I think, really changed the landscape quite a bit for Star Trek fans. And I dare say found maybe some new ones just because of the age of streaming. I think that when you're sitting at home and have nothing to do, turn on some shows and binge watch some good content. And I think that Star Trek has held up over time. And a lot of people, I think, realize that. I know DS9 in particular enjoyed sort of this resurgence of interest because, I mean, it was a serialized show years before that was, the fad or the norm. But personally, my story relating back to COVID, I had not built model starships really before COVID. So when COVID came about, I had a ton of spare time and had nothing else to do. And I decided, you know what, if I'm going to be working from home quite a bit in my home office, I really want a very nice model starship to grace my desk. If I'm going to sit at this all day, I want to have a nice ship. So I ordered one, a sort of factory made one that showed up, and I set it up and I looked at it and I was just kind of like, I think I could do a little better than this. And I have all this time, so why not give it a shot? So I, started gathering what I needed and bought a kit and built my first one, which was just the 1/2500 scale Enterprise D. Very, very, I wouldn't say basic, but fairly straightforward kit. It comes with the decals and everything. So I did that first one, put it together, set it on my desk. I was really proud of it, took some really great photos of it and posted them. But I was looking at it and I'm like, I kind of want a bigger one. Like this is great, but I want to go bigger. Let's go for it. So I started then looking into different kits that were available and found that there were quite a few. And so I think the very first one that I built that was 1/1400 scale was actually the Steam Runner class, which was, not a very common model, and I
I
was
think
thrilled to
what
find it.
only used on screen once, maybe
Yeah, I think we
twice.
saw it. We saw it in First Contact. We saw it in DS9 a few times in the battles, but really cool design, and just kind of ran with it. I believe that design was one of Alex Yeager's, if I'm not mistaken. But really, just a great kit done by Starcrafts. And I think that maybe back then they were called garage kits, but just an injection molded kit that is heavy. Like a lot of people don't realize that some of those StarCraft kits, because they're fully injected molding, not 3D printed. This is like, legit resin. They're
Wow.
really heavy. I mean, a steam runner, it's like a wedge. If you threw it, you probably do some damage. Not that ever will do that, but they're
But
they're
at least
pretty
you know you're
tough.
safe if someone breaks into your home. You just grab the steam runner and go at them.
Yeah. And then if the steam runner doesn't do the job, Norway's right behind it. But
There you
yeah,
go.
they're very sharp. But yeah, so that's sort of how I got started. And I did start posting photos on my then personal Instagram, and started to connect with other model makers, specifically, certainly other Star Trek fans, on a more broader scale, but just the model making community alone, started making some really cool connections. I was introduced or invited to group chats with some of these fellow model makers, and have made some really cool connections over the years. Some of these guys actually have worked on the show or in the movies that we've seen. So yeah, it was pretty cool. The teenager in me was ecstatic that I was sort of being able to connect with some of these folks of tremendous talent. I mean, I pale in comparison to them by far, but yeah, it's really cool. And so that was it. Then I went through COVID, and once I started, I didn't really stop. And I'm well past like 50 builds, I think, at this point, of my own, and then I've done others for other folks as well. But yeah, that's sort of how I got my start during COVID with all the spare time that I had. It was a great way to pass it.
Well, it sounds like you put it to good use. And every photo you have posted, every ship you have posted, have been nothing but beautiful ships. It's artwork in itself. Um,
Thank
I especially your most recent post. I love how you have not only are your ships, you give them stories, and I feel as if they're a story unto themselves, even if it's giving the ship its own name that you have created or whatever the case may be, and I
Sure.
appreciate that, and it's like all too often I think we scroll, we see a picture, we double tap, we scroll, we double tap, but I like stopping, I like reading, I like
Right.
knowing what is there because all
What
too
it's
often
about.
Yeah, the picture isn't the story. So
Right. And unfortunately, I wish I could connect more with some of the folks that designed that actually designed some of the kits that I built, because a lot of these are again, as I said, former garage kits that are very difficult to find now. But somebody put some thought into some of these designs, and if you search really hard on Google, you might be able to find, little bits of information. But one of the coolest things that, has happened is that over the years, the folks that have actually designed a lot of the ships that I built will see the posts and then connect. A really cool one that I was completely amazed by. In the old Starfleet Command PC video games from the late 90s, early 2000s. There's a small scout ship that you start off with, the Okinawa class, and it's in the motion picture era. And it's iconic because everyone starts in that ship. So when you're starting the game, make no mistake, you are in that ship for a little bit and learn how to play the game. So a lot of people, I didn't realize this, have a very strong connection with that particular design, and it's very popular. It just launched in Star Trek Online. And so anyway, I posted some of the pictures of the build that I made, and it's a cool kit because my friend, one of my good friends, Justin, 3D printed it for me. And I was reluctant to use 3D prints because I wasn't sure how they'd look, or, how will this turn out. And he hands it to me, and it's just jet black, the material that he used. And so you put it together, and I'm like, this looks really cool, just black. I might just leave. And then I'm like, no, we gotta actually, dress it up a bit. But finished it, posted the photos, and lo and behold, I get a message from a gentleman who worked for Interplay back in the like mid 90s. And they were, of course, the ones that were producing the Star Trek video games back then. And he had a hand in designing that particular class, the Okinawa class. And he had this whole story about how he was a tester and they were looking for, designs of ships. And he was like in college, I think, and he kind of put together this design. And so he was just thrilled to see an actual physical version of it. Now, 3D printing is coming along so quickly that
yeah,
you could probably find one now very easily and make one yourself. So I feel like I did it just before it became super mainstream. But anyway, but yeah, that's the story of just one of the folks that has reached out and been like, oh, I had a part in this design. Amazing to see it, come to life, and your spin on it. So yeah, good stuff.
that is awesome, and there's nothing better. I understand the feeling of when someone that you, even if you didn't know you admired them, it's someone that you admired reaches out and touches base with you, and it's something special. I get that. I know that feeling.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Um, now, when you of all the ships, of all the ships that you have posted, do you have a favorite? Is it
So
it's like
it's a
Sophie's
great
Choice?
question. Yeah, no, it's a great question. And I have to tell you, it's one of those, it's like, I don't want to say it's like choosing a favorite pet or favorite child or anything silly like that. But, some of them take a really long time, right? And they all sort of, in my mind, have like their own personalities. Some are really, really cooperative and, go off without an issue at all. The Miranda class, Reliant, but I think I did the Nautilus instead. That was probably the best behaved kit that I've done ever. And it's an actual, commercially produced kit. So it should be fairly easy if you're following the directions, right, and know what you're doing. But that was one that I just remember skating through it, finishing it, thinking, wow, that was easy. Then you come across ones where the Galaxy class, a favorite design of mine for sure. It's an older kit, it has a lot of pieces, and a lot of the pieces are not entirely accurate. So you can buy replacement pieces, but even those are not necessarily going to be a perfect fit. So you've got to kind of modify there. But that one, I mean, the windows alone are, it's kind of mind numbing when you're sitting there coloring with a gel pen to make sure that you've got all the right, window colors going on. But the Nebula class is above and beyond even that because it's a full conversion. You're altering elements of the Galaxy class build to make it into the Nebula class. And that one was definitely a lot of work, but the end result was just so cool to see. It's probably one of the best ones that I've ever done. I was super impressed by how that one came about, came together. And it looks really nice in the sun. Take it out for a few seconds, get the great shots, and run back inside with it. But my favorite is probably and always will be the Excelsior. It's such an iconic design. I could build it in my sleep. Don't need any of the directions at all, nor for the decals. I just know it, front to back, all the little details about it. So yeah, probably the Excelsior class is my favorite. The Righteous is the one that I did, which of course, if you're a fan again of the Star Trek PC video games, the Righteous was featured in Star Trek Borg, and that's one that I definitely built as a shout out to that game.
Question for you on your, like when you get around to painting, do you
Yeah.
do everything by hand?
Mostly, yes. So obviously there's airbrushing that, for kind of the base coat. And so, I've kind of settled in on sort of the colors that I want to use for both the motion picture era and then also the TNG era ships. They're different colors, certainly. But from there, the rest of it is largely by hand. And it just depends on the kit. Some of the kits come with wallpaper decals, which
Oh,
basically cover most of the, outside of the model itself.
oh, like the
Um,
Aztecing?
Yes, exactly. So Aztecs a lot of times you'll have to like, it doesn't come all as like one sheet or anything like that, but you can kind of carve it up. You've got to fit everything and make sure things like phaser arrays, that's typically
Yeah.
something that I do by hand. The navigational deflector arrays, that's typically done by hand. The warp nacelle grills, the Busar collectors, that's all done by hand. Um, Decals are usually Aztecs. And then even though sometimes you can accent with different paint colors, the Ambassador class certainly has a lot of blue in it that, if you look at the studio model, it's like that's bluer, I think, than it even shows up on screen. So that was one where I remember I had decals on it. I wasn't really happy with the way the decals were turning out. So I took them off. And then I switched to paint, and I was really nervous to do it because paint is so solid, for the most part. And so finished it up, and I didn't know what it was going to look like. But when I put the matte finish on it, and then did the windows and started posting pictures of it, it turned out better than I ever could have imagined. And it was just a stroke of luck. I mean, truly, it wasn't like I sought out to use paint. But that one was one of probably the most hand painted ones that I did. The Klingon ships are
Yeah.
all hand painted. Um, that's the totally hand painted because you can really, get some freedom when it comes to how they look. They're not as clean and neat as the Starfleet designs tend to be. So it allows you to be a little more flexible with your creativity. But the Klingon ships are all hand painted. I don't use any kind of airbrushing or anything for those.
I remember when I was a kid, it was what, 84. I saw
Hmm.
the Bird of Prey the first time,
Yeah.
and I remember thinking, how is this thing dirty in space? We didn't know it landed then,
It could land,
like how is it dirty? And until Star Trek 4 came out, that was a question I had
yeah.
just
Yeah. No,
racking
it's
my
a great
little
question.
brain.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a great question, and again, I mean, it's appropriate for the Klingons, right? It makes sense that they would have a little more grit to them, perhaps, than our straight-laced Starfleet ships. But even in some of the Starfleet ones, I've sort of toyed around with like weathering or aging, just to kind of give it more of a realistic look. Sometimes, um, some it works better than others, but yeah, I mean, it's a thing.
So I'm curious, what is your Star Trek story? What brought you into the Star Trek universe?
Geez, let's see. So I was probably, I think, as I said, I was maybe 8 years old, and my father had on Star Trek 2 in our living room on, the smaller TVs that we used to have back then, and it was probably just on like network TV or something. But caught that, and I was amazed at how nautical it was. I know that like some people don't like Star Trek 2 for it being too nautical, but I was very attracted to that. Both of my grandfathers were in the Navy, so I kind of had a bit of knowledge on that. Then as that was airing, there was like a commercial for the Next Generation, and I thought, huh, that's interesting. It's Star Trek, but not them. It's not Spock and Kirk, who of course everybody knew. So I watched The Next Generation, and back then it aired, I think it was like Friday nights at 10 p.m. And of course, at that age, I was lucky enough to stay awake that late without being told to go to bed. Um, but yeah, so I started watching The Next Generation. I think it was in their third season at the time. Um, so,
So
you
when
know,
it was
but
good,
then
when it started getting good.
yeah, right. I timed it just right. But then they aired on weeknights at 6 p.m. in our local Fox affiliate or whatever it was. They would re-air the first two seasons. So I really quickly caught up on Next Generation. Then I doubled back and watched all of the original series movies. And then, I mean, that was it. From there, I was there for the very first DS9, the very first Voyager, very first, and the rest. I've watched every single first run, pilot I think I've seen, as it aired or became, readily available. So that's pretty much it. And it appealed to me. It's when you watch a crew like that come together, you've got all these different viewpoints, these different talents that come together, and they're all just there to do a job, and they do their job so well. And of course there's morality stories that are told in these. And at that age, when you're taking lessons from these things, it's, of course everyone loves seeing starships in space and phasers firing and explosions and stuff like that. And certainly that had its appeal. But I also really appreciated the storytelling, and some of those episodes that I think back on even now resonate, just because of the messaging or because of the acting or the what it was trying to say, and I think that that's probably what really drew me to it, the sense of adventure and the sense of really having something to say, and this group of folks coming together and working well at what they do.
Well, that's good. That's probably the best answer I could have ever even asked for. Very well.
Unrehearsed, I hope.
No, no, no. I am curious though. Did you ever find yourself, drawn towards a particular character, someone that maybe struck a chord with you on a different level?
Yeah. Oh gosh. I mean, so many. I always had a thing for Beverly Crusher. I think I've said this, before, with other folks that have asked me these questions around like who's your favorite character. I just thought that she was. I always go for kind of like, I don't want to say underdog characters, but characters that you may not know so much about initially, or it takes a minute to actually like get to know. They kind of like feed you little tidbits about these characters. But what struck me about her, I remember thinking, she's the chief medical officer. She's a full commander. She has, three pips. That's no slouch, right? She's a single mom. Her son is a prodigy, a genius kid, obviously on the show as well. Left for the year at Starfleet Medical, just decided that was fine, but wants to go back to the flagship and continue working with her friends. I just thought that there was something really cool about her. It was almost like, I don't know if they intended for her to be that way, but the way that I sort of processed her was that she was just really, really good at what she did. But then of course, a lot of the characters in TNG, they all kind of speak to you in different ways. Data trying to discover humanity, and listening, watching all those around him. I thought that that was really cool. Um, you know, Riker, of course, he was sort of. I think I learned a lot about connecting with people, especially people that perhaps you work with. He just had such a way, a charm about him that was never, well, I shouldn't say never. It depended on if it was some of the ladies, but never inappropriate, never condescending. But he always found ways to connect. And I always thought that was really cool. Picard, of course, with diplomacy and just really dealing with some heavy, heavy issues, but in ways that never compromised, his moral integrity or anything like that. And those are all lessons I think I took. And that's just TNG. I mean, all the rest of the series have characters that are, in many ways very, very informative of who I was at an age that was just a sponge, looking to be influenced and looking for role models. It was just the right place at the right time for me with a lot of the characters.
That's good. I can appreciate that, and I love the love for Beverly. I always love
Yeah,
it when people there's I don't know if it's on purpose, but sometimes I think the doctors are put to the side a little bit,
yeah,
with the exception of Bones. But
right. But
but
I think yeah, his whole thing, of course, being the injection of like real emotion and heart and humanity in that triad of Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, and that's amazing. DeForest Kelly, I can't say enough good about such an amazing character as well. But yeah, I think that Beverly, especially in the movies, kind of got pushed to the side a little bit, but they then Picard season 3 came around and they more than made up for it. Now, I don't want to curse this, and you may have to edit this out after this is done, but
okay,
Gates McFadden this weekend is supposed to be coming to Buffalo for a Comic-Con. And I have every intention of meeting her and, getting an autograph, getting a photograph with her, I hope. She was supposed to come a couple of years ago and ended up canceling like right before. So I'm not getting my hopes like too far up because
well
I
here's
don't
what we're
want her
gonna
to not show up, but
here's what
I
we're
really
gonna
hope I
do.
can.
You won't this one won't air until long after that.
Oh,
So
good.
you're
Okay.
you're 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 a few weeks away. So what we're gonna do right now, sometime between this airing and right now, you send me a picture if you get that picture or whatever,
Oh, yeah,
or
I
and
will.
we'll put an update on the screen. That way we can let
For
everybody
sure.
know what happened. So
Yeah, I'm really excited for it. I'm really hoping that it works out. COVID was another thing that kind of took something like that away. Jonathan Frakes and Marina Sirtis were supposed to come to Buffalo Comic Con, Nickel City
um,
Comic Con, and it was right when COVID had started, and they both ended up. A lot of people ended up canceling. I think they canceled the entire event. But now, of course, Marina Sirtis has moved back to UK. So she's
yeah,
not doing conventions so much anymore. So I really feel like I missed out on that one. So I'm hoping that Gates shows up this weekend here in Buffalo. So we'll
I
see how
think
it
it's
goes.
nice that she has an Instagram now and she's answering questions. I like that. That's kind of
Marina or Gates or both. Yeah.
Marina. Sorry, Marina.
Yeah. No, I started following her right away. I
Yeah.
because yeah, I think I saw it on like Trek movie or something where they posted, would she come back and had some links to her Instagram, which I'm like, follow, of course.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, no, it's nice to be able to connect with a lot of the stars in ways, and not even just stars, but if we could bring it back to the starship design, as I said, you know, um, Alex Yeager, John Eves. I know Probert is on social medias. I mean, a lot of these folks that you're posting now, you can tag them and they
Yeah.
will, like and comment on the stuff that you've done. And that to me is just beyond gratifying. When one of the folks that helped or had a hand in designing something like this is complimenting you on the work that you've done on their design to bring it to life. That's just like the coolest thing.
No, and I agree with you 100%. I think if social media is done well, it can be a tool for reaching out to the people and giving them their flowers like this. And that's something it should be. Because I mean, there's plenty of people that I would, if I could make a list of people I'd want to thank from my childhood,
Right.
I would do it.
Yeah,
And
yeah. So then the other thing that I think we haven't talked about too, so as you well know, the starships, but then the figures as well. That's something that we haven't really talked about. The custom figures that I've sort of done as well. So that came about, I think, again during COVID. I was some of the ships, they're really complicated, and there's also I tend to have more than one going at any given time. But
oh,
there were
really?
still like these moments where I'm like, all right, I'm waiting for this one to dry. I'm waiting for this, waiting for all these different things to happen. And then I'm like, well, what else can I do? What else can I work on that's perhaps easy and maybe fast in between. Not to say easy, in a bad way, but the figures tend to be a little less effort, I would dare say, than the ships. So then I started doing, really taking a look at a lot of the Playmates, the figures from the 90s. And I had, this is a conceit, but I probably had maybe a quarter of all of the ones that they produced. And it felt like I had a lot, but when you really take a look at how many they made, I
Yeah.
really didn't have that much. It was like, oh wow, I have a lot more I need. And then of course you start looking at, well, what about the characters that don't have figures that you could probably pretty easily make? And so then just started down the path of that. And that was a ton of fun coming up with just, and sometimes it was as easy as removing a head and putting it on a different body, and voila, you have a motion picture check off that they didn't release, but it would have been super easy for them to do it.
Yeah.
So that was another thing that I kind of enjoyed doing and took a lot of photos of as well.
And I love anything with figures. I understand exactly what you mean too. I feel the same way. I feel like I had a whole bunch, like I've shared literally every figure I've ever owned, I have shared at some point, and
Yeah,
I
it's
still
amazing.
realize I'm still missing hundreds.
Yeah.
It's like, how did I do this? But I'm going through the process now of opening them and displaying them to my ability. And I get a lot of people, why are you doing that? Why are you opening them? It's like, because why? I mean, they take up less space open than they do in a package,
Yeah,
in a box,
that's
in a
true. That
shelf,
is
and so
Yeah, that is very true. And also, it's to be enjoyed. They're to be enjoyed, and sometimes it's hard to enjoy them if they're just, in a box hanging on a wall somewhere. It's like, yeah. But no,
well,
I appreciate it.
the space element is my next question for you. You
Mhm.
said you're up to over 50 designs and such. Have you run into space issues, or how are you displaying them, or you
Yeah,
know
it's a great question. I mean, I can send photos certainly, but I'm in my home office right now. Behind me, you probably can't see it, but I have so there's the motion picture sort of. It's like an angled table, and they all so far fit very nicely on there. Although I don't really think I could probably fit many more on there unless they're really, really small. Then I have so I have my desk is here up above. I have like this entire flat surface that acts as like, a pretty big shelf. And that's most of the TNG 11400 fleet, all there. And then I've got shelving lining my wall to the left of that. And that's the rest of the 11400. Mostly the first contact fleet is over there. And then Klingon fleet is on a table kind of right behind me. And again, they don't take up a ton of space. I tend to do like tighter formations so that it fits. And that they actually photograph really well when they're tightly together as well. So yeah, I wouldn't say I've run completely out of room yet. There are some that have made their way into like the room where I actually make them, which is in my basement. It's like a finished kind of workroom. So there are a few. The first one I ever did, I think, is down there because it doesn't really fit with the rest of the skills. But yeah, I definitely I'm at a point now where it would be if I had to build a large one, I would have to find a place for it, a special place or something.
do you find yourself ever going outside the Star Trek universe in shipbuilding, like with other sci-fi ships?
Yeah, so I've done a few of the Star Wars ships for friends, but because it's not Star Trek, I haven't really posted pictures of them. I don't, and not that it would be controversial. I'm sure it would get support as well, but just sticking with the theme. But no, I have friends that are Star Wars fans, and they're just like, oh my God, you've got to build me one, please. Like, can you make it happen? And I'm like, oh yeah, I'm like, sure. So definitely have kind of ventured out outside of just Star Trek, but Star Trek's my favorite. I really needed the directions for some of the Star Wars ones because I don't know what they look like as well or as closely as some of the Star Trek ones. The Star Trek ones too are really you can find studio model photos now of most of the designs or most of the ships that have been featured. And so I try to use those as much as I possibly can as guides. So, that's the goal is if one of the highest compliments I can get is if someone says that looks just like the studio model. That's like the nicest thing you could say. It's like, oh yes, so good. That means I did well because that's exactly what I was looking at while doing it.
Well, if nothing else, May the 4th is always a good day to share those.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely. Of course, of course. Maybe that's what I'll do. I'll on those days I'll post the pictures then.
Yeah, I know, that's great. I was gonna say if there would ever be if if I know the Star Wars thing too. I'm a Star Wars guy, and everybody's like, "Oh, you like the Star Wars, right?" And like, yeah, I like Star Wars, but I'm more of
Yeah,
the Star Trek guy. But I love Firefly. Like the Serenity is,
yeah,
that's my ship.
yeah,
Um,
for sure.
I think I have a thing towards smaller ships. Like I have the Defiant behind me. I
Hmm.
like the Defiant. I'm a Deep Space Nine guy. So
I have the Defiant in a few different scales. I think the one that is kind of on its own is the 1/1000 Defiant, the brazen that I did with it has like the shark
oh,
teeth
okay.
on the forward hull on the nose. Um, I feel like it's weird to call it 1/1000 because if you set it next to the 1/1000 TMP fleet, it doesn't seem like it makes a lot of sense, but
Right.
whatever. But no, there are some that I built that are really, really small, but just because they're small doesn't mean that you can be any less detailed, in my opinion. You still have to find all those little details that are, that make them sort of special, the small ones. And I like them too. Some of the stories I've come up with, some of those, kind of underrepresented ships that probably exist in the Star Trek universe that, we don't really necessarily see or you're only hearing about but never seeing it. So trying to put a visual to some of those has always been kind of fun. But likewise, people always, I get asked a lot of times, oh, you love Star Wars, right? And I'm like, well, I do. But I'm more Star Trek than Star Wars. But I don't know. I've never really been one to have disdain or dislike for Star Wars. I have plenty of, sci-fi geekery within me that there's plenty of room for both. Star
No,
Wars
I
is
get it.
amazing in its own right. So yeah.
No, I get that. I get that 100%. I now I have one last question for you, and I'm just
Sure.
curious about it. When you decide you're going to do a ship, like let's say you're on doing your next project,
Mhm.
how do you come up with that inspiration? What inspires you to pick a specific ship and go with
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. Oh, great question. So for me, um, I've established at this point fleets more or less, if that kind of makes sense. So, in the beginning, it was very much so next generation bleeding into first contact with the fleet that we saw against the Borg. So all of Alex Yeager's designs, and it was again, this is probably what lends itself so well when I say once I started, I couldn't stop because then it was like, okay, I did the steam runner. Well, now I have to do the Norway, the Saber. I need a Defiant in there. And then it's like once you start looking at okay, Akira, I need an Akira class. Well, now maybe we need a Sovereign class, a Nebula class. So it literally became that. And just didn't stop. And then likewise with the motion picture era, there were so many motion picture era designs that came out of fandom in well the 70s 80s and 90s especially as I remember being young. So ships like the Belknap class, I mean that was hanging on my wall, a poster when I was probably 9 years old, never actually seen it on screen, but a fan came up with a whole story and design, and to me it was real. It didn't need to be in the show. So I sought out those kits if they were available, back then through Federation Models, which I think has since gone defunct, but they had a lot of those options available. So it was all around then, okay, let's complete the fleet or build out the fleet so that if it's a Constitution class ship or Excelsior class ship, it's not alone. It's going to have all these other ones that are support craft with it, right? That look the part. And not just look the part, but then I will always put time into choosing a name, an appropriate name. And so some of them come from, there were fan publications, ships of the Starfleet. There are some that I've done that were, derived from that. So names, registries that come from there. Otherwise, I kind of do my own research. There are some that came out of, memory beta. So some of these are from books. I said the one was from a, video game. That's another source I draw from. So yeah, it's usually there's usually thought put into the name and even the registry in many cases, a lot of birthdays of family members and registries of my ships. But then also, there's the one or two off where, and I'll, this is a bit of an admission or a conceit, but some of the smaller ones, when you're doing custom decals, the space limitation, there's a reason why there's a ship called the USS Sky. It's only 3 letters. So I knew it was going to fit, in the very limited space that I had. So yeah, there are a number of factors. I like it when I'm able to put some thought into it as opposed to, being pushed into a direction.
That's a good one. The USS Sky. I think that's the best reason of all. It's tiny. It's so
It's a
tiny. I
nice
like
name,
that.
but the real
Yeah, well,
reason
no, I
the
dig
real
it.
reason is because it would fit, it was like, okay, that'll work. I think there was another one I did, it was the Hawk. And I thought, okay, 4 letters, we'll make it work, but
Do you
uh, you
find
know,
yourself going back and looking to see if there has been a ship with that name? And
yeah, yes, usually I will. And I try not to contradict, so I was kind of crushed when I finished my Nebula class, which I really like, I mentioned earlier, and I named it the Echelon. And I thought that is such a great starship name. It begins with letter E. Even it's proud and it's strong. It's a great name. And then watching Star Trek Picard, I think was it season 3? I think it was where there's Echelon class starships, and I'm thinking, well, all right, let's rationalize it by saying it came out a few years later and maybe the Nebula class Echelon has kind of retired or moved on or whatever.
hey,
But so that was one of the few examples I think where one of my names like truly clashed, but it was okay. It didn't bother me too much.
I like it. I like it. I think this is a good time for you to take the floor and tell everybody where can they find you? What
Yeah.
can your ads, your socials, everything. Tell
Yeah,
us where
so
we can.
Yeah, so on Instagram, that's almost exclusively where I am. Renegade Shipyards, really easy to find. Obviously, during COVID, I had a ton of spare time and was cranking these things out at rapid pace. Since then, obviously, I have a social life that has resumed. So this past summer, especially, I had a number of trips where I was in Europe for 3 weeks. So some significant time away. So I'm still posting, albeit not as frequently perhaps as before, and definitely still building, but at a slower pace. There's another guy I think that does one on Instagram, and his name is building models slowly or something like that. And now I fully understand why he would name himself that, because truly, if you want to be able to put the quality and the effort into these, you can't rush. So I'm producing them still, but it's at a much slower pace than it was before. But I'm definitely not stopping. It's definitely fun to do. And winter is coming. I'm from Buffalo, New York, so winters in Buffalo, you usually have some spare time at your disposal compared to the summers where you're outside almost all the time. So yeah, more projects in the works. I think I have 3 on my bench right now. And then I have like a backlog of probably like 7 or 8 that are already primed. So like, meaning the base coats are on them. I don't need to be outside in freezing cold temperatures waiting for things to dry. That probably won't. So I have, a whole bunch of really clean looking ship models waiting to be done up in line. So more to come.
All right. Well, it's all good and it's worth waiting for. So I appreciate your time. I appreciate your
Thank you.
stories. I appreciate everything that you said today because holy crap, amazing. Love it
Thank
all.
you very much.
Yeah, and thank you for being here. And everybody, please go give him a follow. Check out the work. You won't be disappointed, I promise you.
Thank
And
you. And feel free to send me messages as well. I love, like you, I love hearing, even if a guy on one of the latest ones I posted said, it's hideous. And I laughed because I thought, well, it is kind of not the best looking ship, but, I appreciate the feedback
are
and
you,
that's
wait a minute, wait a minute,
okay,
wait a minute.
good
When you
or
talk
bad.
about, which
But
one are
if
you
you,
talking about?
but if folks want to have, some dialogue, by all means, that's one of the best parts about it is being able to connect with other Star
Are
Trek
we,
fans, have a
we talking
chat.
about this one? Oh,
I
yeah,
can't
it
tell.
doesn't want to show up. It's too bright.
Yeah.
Hold on.
It looks like a spoon in space. It's got like the single sort of, oh no, not that one.
Oh, okay.
That one's pretty well liked, actually. I think
Oh, you're
that might be
talking
where
this.
the, yeah, that one right there. I tried to come up with a story to justify the look of that one in a way that was passable, and for some people it just still wasn't. And that's okay. Totally get
To,
it.
to
It's
me,
definitely not a pretty sovereign class. What can I
to,
say?
to me, it looks like Starfleet hired a Cardassian and he designed it.
That's,
You
yeah,
know,
exactly.
Eh,
Exactly. We'll go with that.
it's maybe the Cardassia joined the Federation. We don't know. Yeah,
Could be. Could very well be.
well, I appreciate your time and thank you so much for being here. And live long and prosper.